living in an artificially induced state of consciousness that resembles sleep. The poor and the underclass are growing. Racial justice and human rights are non-existent. We have been lulled into a trance. They have made us indifferent to ourselves, to others. We are focused only on our own gain. That is their primary method of survival. Keep us asleep, keep us selfish, keep us sedated.
You're listening to Toward Anarchy on the Republic Broadcasting Network. Here's your host, Michael Storm.
All right, here we go. We are off. Welcome to the show. It is Toward Anarchy. I am your host, Michael Storm. Thank you so much for joining me. It is a beautiful Sunday in the middle of America. I'm here real close, very, 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 very close to the very actual geographic middle of America. So I don't mind saying that. It's sunny. It's breezy and cool, but it's nice. So I invited the world in. Hopefully, that doesn't come back to bite me. It sometimes does. Everybody's home. Everybody's kind of used to it now, but there's still that sort of weird idea that it should be completely quiet and silent in the background of the presentation when everybody realizes that it was a thing when I worked on I did phone support for Microsoft for the Xbox platform for a couple of years, and it was something that they were very adamant about. I've also worked for Disney and 1-800-Flowers and Pizza Hut. Interesting story about that. I might have to get into it. I don't have a lot of time today. I've got so much in here to try and fit into the 2 hours that we have, or so 1 hour and 38 minutes of actual talk time that we have. Because I have this amazing conversation today for you with Foster Gamble. He's the co-writer, one of the co-directors, along with Kimberly Carter Gamble and many other people who contributed to this amazing movie, Thrive 2. This Is What It Takes. It's a follow-up to it was a mega hit, Thrive, the first one. Millions and millions and millions of people have seen it, and it still continues to be seen by about 1 million people a month, apparently. It's one thing that Foster mentions when we're in our conversation. But I wouldn't let him get off the phone or off Zoom, as the case was, and we will have some video for you to share on YouTube a little later this evening to go along with it. But I wouldn't let him off the phone. So we have about a 55-minute conversation, so it's broke up into 3 parts. We'll start that at the bottom of the hour. It's uncut, except for just just a comment here or a comment there that doesn't it doesn't add or subtract from the conversation. That I could just trim off the end or the beginning. I didn't pick anything out of the middle. It was just where it was starting points for new conversations or new points that we were making. And there's a reason for that, because I didn't want to just hand the stuff to Ken. I'm so bad about doing this. I've been bad about doing this, where I just hand it to Ken and I say here and expect him to work his magic on the end of it. But it's really nice if I do just a little bit more work on my end. I mean, literally just a little bit more work on my end to add a few things that make it easier for Ken to just drop the stuff in and then go about doing other things. Or, as the case may be, I imagine today you'll probably be listening. I know this is an exciting conversation. This is a fantastic conversation to talk with somebody like Foster Gamble about the things that we talk about. We talk about voluntarism. We talk about anarchy. We talk about how those two things in particular, the notion of a non-aggression principle, those sorts of things, how they are core to his value system and they're core to the ideas that they look for in the thousands of ideas and inventions and people and products and things that they searched through that came to them, initially over the last 8 years or so since they released the first one, from all over the world, from people who are just interested. Look, we have free energy, we have this, we have that, check it out. And so what they did is they went and they did the homework, and they looked at all the stuff, and they said, all right, well, we can look at this. This one's not finished. These guys don't want to talk about it. These guys are scared. It took all of these things into consideration, tried to take some of the best of that, the most exciting free market, decentralized solutions to some of the world's biggest problems: healthcare, the environment, the monetary system, the economy, all of these things, and fit them into another package, and that people accept. And people, it was a hard thing to do. Think about it. I don't want to give any more of the conversation away because we talk about a bunch of this stuff. So I'll stop. Just Foster Gamble is coming up in just about 25 minutes, and there's an amazing conversation that the two of us have. Even if you ignore my stumbling and fumbling and my sort of giddiness at just getting a chance to talk with someone that's so tuned in, a light worker. That's what I say to him at the end of it. I comment on the fact that he and Kimberly and the people that are doing this are light workers, and I don't necessarily mean that in a cultish sense or in some particular group. I just mean that in the general sense of the word, that they're people looking for these real world positive solutions to the world's problems. They're bringing light to truth about all of these issues and about these concepts and ideas, and it's a fantastic package. The show, there's only one place that you can see it right now. That information is at towardanarchy.com. You have to like, you have to share, follow, subscribe wherever you're hearing the show at to get this out to people. I've made that as easy as I possibly can. You're looking for November 15th. If you're not live with me, if it's not right there on the front page at towardanarchy.com, November 15th, 2020, you see Foster Gamble talks with me about anarchy, voluntarism, and of course, the amazing new documentary Thrive 2, This Is What It Takes. Following on the massive success of the first Thrive movie, they've returned to talk about more solutions. And there's a link there. Watch Thrive, This Is What It Takes on thriveon.com, thriveon.com, and investigate all the tools and resources there, too. You can follow the Thrive movement on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram. I shared the Facebook link. They're easy enough to find. It's just look for Thrive movement. They're like me. They kind of grab their little corner of the internet and their couple of key words, and they're sticking to them, and it works for them. So if you look for Thrive movement, odds are you're going to find them. But thriveon.com is the easiest way, and you can get to all that other stuff from there. But make sure to like and share and follow and subscribe. I shared a couple other links for you. Data shows that poverty in the United States was plummeting until Lyndon Johnson declared war on it. Just some economic history for you, a little political history, some homework. There you go. Ticketmaster plans vaccination verification and health check process to attend their concerts and events, and that's just exactly what it says. It's about their outline about what they intend to do about it. That's from Billboard.com. You shouldn't have a problem, no paywalls or anything like that. The other articles from FEE, the Foundation for Economic Education, no paywalls. Everybody should be able to see those. I chose this quote. This is from the write-up of thriveon.com about Thrive 2. Inspiring transpolitical grassroots decentralized solutions, Thrive 2 offers practical tools for reclaiming authority over our lives, from new sources of energy to breakthrough health cures. Thrive 2 provides the insights and resources needed for viewers to take next steps in accessing and supporting the solutions that can truly create a world that works for everyone. And I shared a pretty picture of it, their promo picture from the website for and the cover, I imagine, for any DVD they release. It's just just a beautiful picture, some beautiful imagery of our world. And so the links are there. You can do it. You can support the show. Since the conversation went a little bit longer, I won't have as much time on the backside to talk about a couple of things. And I don't know what I want to talk about for sure. I watched Bill and Ted Face the Music this week for some nerds, the geeks that are into that, and it was fun. It was not nearly as interesting or as funny as the originals, and I wasn't huge on the originals anyway. I liked them; they were fine. I know that they'd contributed to the vernacular and to our lexicon as it is, but I wasn't a huge fan of those movies. I was into other movies at the time, better movies at the time for sure, in my assessment, of course. Anyway, but anybody that really did like them will enjoy it. I always try to watch these things, whatever it is, with in sort of a blank slate. That's not to not watch them critically, but that's not to watch them critically in anticipation of them being anything more than they are. I'm not going to try to compare Bill and Ted Face the Music to Gone with the Wind. That's what I'm not going to do. I'm going to compare Bill and Ted to Bill and Ted, and that's what everybody else is going to do. And my assessment of that is that most people will assume it wasn't as good as the originals, but it's exactly what you would expect from people at that point in their lives who are making these kind of stories and following up on characters that they created years and years ago. In 1989, the first one came out. If you're a Kevin Smith fan, if you followed the Clerks franchise and Jay and Silent Bob, you'll understand exactly what I'm talking about. The recent Jay and Silent Bob movie was just exactly what Bill and Ted was. It had Kevin Smith in tears. Face the Music had Kevin Smith in tears for the last half of it because it reminded him of his own existence in that sense. But that's the thing about them. It's them being adults and growing up and having their children take over their dreams. That's living through their children, seeing that reality. These big successful people who've had these amazing careers in Hollywood or in any place else, and oftentimes they hit a certain age in their life and their children have grown up and they look back and they go, oh wow, I missed some things, or maybe they didn't, maybe they were there for the whole thing, but they still look back on it with a sense of nostalgia, and they look at their children growing older and becoming adults and becoming. We all experience this if you have children. It's that success of raising children and having a family that you hope for in the end, is that you get to see them just growing up and being free, smart, successful in their own right, whatever it is that they want to do, and this is reflected in those movies. And so if you want that heartfelt notion, if you're 50 years old and you're at that same point in your life, then you will have that feeling too. Oh, a correction to last week. I was talking about UFOs, and thanks to Chris, we know he's not really named Chris. I know his real name. He pointed out that it was Above Majestic, and I think I did that the last time that I was talking about that movie. Above Majestic is that movie where they're talking about the it's just recent and it's really well produced, but it talks about sort of the gateway to the moon. The battleships in space, the submarines in space dating back to Hitler, and the Hollow Earth, and a bunch of things like that. David Wilcock, that's great movie, really. If you haven't seen Above Majestic, and I'm kicking myself because I keep doing that. I kept calling it Above Top Secret or something like that, but it's Above Majestic is the name of that. I wanted to correct that. And I was talking about SETI last week, and then this occurred again. It's still falling, I guess. This has been going on for a little while, but the Arecibo telescope is collapsing. I haven't looked at the details. I just know that I've seen these images and I keep seeing headlines about it falling apart, and they're worried that it's going to go through a total collapse at some point here. And that's unfortunate. But you know what? The reality is that thing is old and that there's newer technology that can replace it. So, it would be fantastic if in the end, somebody looks to replace it with newer technology, and that it's not that big of a loss, I guess, when it comes down to it. Arecibo had been there for a long, long time. A lot of data, and they shut down the SETI program, and I think was it its purpose entirely? I'm not certain. Don't know. Not enough of a geek to know it all. I don't pretend to. There was one thing that I wanted to talk about, and I don't know if I'll get a chance any further in the show, and I still have time, so why not try to tackle it now? This is a thing. It just happened, and it's about the conversation skills. It's about this important communication that I'm trying to suggest that is the bigger problem when it comes to people on the social media. It's their inability to communicate in general. And in this case, it's argumentation. And if you don't know what argumentation is, if you haven't heard that specific word before, or you have heard the word argument said as argumentation, that's the actual skill, the practice of arguing to reach a conclusion, to find understanding, to learn from a conversation with somebody who has a different understanding, maybe different information that you don't have, whatever it is. Argumentation is not a couple of people hollering at each other. It's a couple of people talking to each other, using logic, language, rhetoric, the proper, I mean, if you want to talk about the school definition of it, a proper methodology of trying to reach conclusions, to learn and to grow from it. And conversation, argumentation, this is between two or more people, probably best between two people. It gets confusing the more voices you add to it. There's the greater potential for noise, and I've talked about this before. It's a communications thing. It's all of these things that get in the way of getting a message across, whether it's the tone of your voice, the presentation that you have, with it. But okay, so this was the point. The most important thing is the language that you use. It's very important to use correct language, particularly in a formal setting when you're actually trying to argue for the sake of learning something. So you're trying to learn something, you're trying to grow, you're trying to reach a conclusion. This is the academic, if you will, setting for argumentation, whether it's real world or in the classroom or not. But it's so... that's the application of these actual skill sets in argumentation, the things that you need to know. Language being the very first one. And it's funny because I have this conversation with people over and over again. They'll say that I can't dismiss a person's argument based on their language. But let me give you a clue. Let me just explain this to you. And this is funny because I had no intention of doing this. This is usually the way these things work. Because I have these understandings in my brain. They're there because they're very simple connections when you just are trying to make connections, when you're trying to understand the truth and you're trying to understand a reality and you're trying to be able to make an argument for a thing. I picked this up in the secondhand store, and I've never more than just cracked it and sort of looked at words and some of the images, and there's not that there's a lot of images in it. It's a textbook. It's a textbook on argumentation. It's elements of argument, and it's funny because I saw it sitting over there on the shelf when I was having this conversation about being able to dismiss an argument based on the failed use of language, whether it be abusive language or whether it be academically, logically, or any other method of incorrect or what I deem to be incorrect. Nobody else gets to decide that. I get to decide that because it's me having the conversation with the other person. And so I'm thinking about that, and they're telling, oh, well, you have to learn to speak a new language. You have to learn to understand what they're saying. I get that. I know that. And to assume that I don't know what they're saying is to assume too much of the conversation that we haven't had yet at all. And to tell me that I can't dismiss or I can't correct a person for their failed use of language when it comes to argumentation is false. And I'll tell you why. I said because it's the number one thing when it comes to, it's the number one part of the skill set in argumentation, the language. And so then I thought about it sometime later. In fact, it was just before the show. I thought about it. I go over there and I grab the book and I look at it in the very first chapter, learning the key terms. I'll come back in just a minute. We got just a few more minutes before we're joined by Foster Gambler right here on Toward Anarchy. TowardAnarchy.com. You need to go find November 15th, if you have to click on the archive button, that's easy to do. Click on archive right up there at the top. Select Toward Anarchy 2020 archive. Select November 2020. November 15th should be right there. And Foster Gamble will be my guest. He's joining me in just a few minutes. We just had this conversation Friday evening, so it's still super fresh. And frankly, just like the Thrive movie, the first one, the conversation is evergreen. It truly is. It's timeless. There's nothing about what we're talking about that requires a understanding of a specific period of time. So it'd be fantastic to just jump right in and listen at any time, including going back and watching the original Thrive movie. If you wanted to do that, you can do that. It is free. It has always been free. I joked with Boss. You'll probably see it on the video. It's probably not here. I joked with him a little bit just about sharing many copies of the original Thrive movie. I've shared many copies of many documentaries over the years, just free, recorded onto a DVD, handed out on a street corner, thousands and thousands of it, spindle after spindle. Not myself personally, but myself as a group of other people. I've handed out many personally myself as a group. We are Change, Colorado. We handed out uncounted and still do. They're actually a little active again after some number of years not really doing anything. It's good to see that happening again. I'd like to get back there and participate a little bit and hang out with some of my friends. You've met some of them. You need to meet some of them on the show. There's some great people. There really are. And they do some really good things. Go to towardanarchy.com. That link is there. Make sure to share that, because what we'll do is we'll kick off the conversation here in a few minutes, and as always, there's those little short spots in there. And since we have a three-parter on this one, I'll jump in a couple of times and reiterate where to go and to make sure that you're sharing this stuff and to get people to jump in. We're live right now, but after the show, not long after it, we'll have the archive up. It'll be on iHeartRadio. It'll be on iTunes. It'll be on Spreaker, Stitcher, Spotify. It'll be on the republicbroadcasting.org archive. It'll be on the Toward Anarchy archive. It will be everywhere. Look for it. It'll be on YouTube. We'll have video later on in the evening. I'll do the same thing that I did. I hadn't done this previously. I'd just been taking the video, but I like my part of the show. I like my part of the show to be included in there. So just the radio part of it is in there, and then it kicks into video in the middle of it, and so you'll be able to see that. You'll be able to see Foster and the conversation, and go watch the movie. You have to go watch the movie. I'm not going to talk about the specifics of the movie because you have to watch it for yourself. There's a lot in it, and there's a lot to take in. We sat down and watched it yesterday. We didn't have a chance to watch it before. We were going to. We tried to do movie night, but it just didn't work out. Everybody working, not expecting to have to do things that they ended up having to do, including myself even. And I'm the last person. I'm the last person you usually have to worry about that has some other time conflict. So, but we did. The family and I sat down and watched it yesterday, and it's just amazing. It's great. It's as good as the first one, except this time around, it's not. There's not as much conversation about the meta events like the 9/11. Not that there's a ton of that stuff really either in the first one, but this one is just, laser focus on solutions and the different people that are working voluntarily around the world to do these things. And it was just a fantastic conversation. I'm really glad to be able to share it with you. So you're going to have to. Think about when Thrive originally came out, just the idea of how what was going on at the time. So, about 2011, because they did that 11/11/11 thing, and Occupy was going on, and there was other documentaries going around, and there was just a lot of unrest and uncertainty. It's similar to what's going on now. It's really quite timely in that respect. So the ideas that are within it, the message that's within it, that's core to it, are all consistent with the values and things that I speak about here. And I only speak about what I believe is true in my own and what has worked for myself and in my life, and what has made me happy and as successful as I am, as it were, even with embezzling business partners and businesses that I'm still having to pay the rent out of my pocket. But that's beside the point. That's just a fact of, well, let's put some of that's got a lot to do with the economy and the fact that the government did the shutdown and everything. That affected my business directly. Business that I'm involved in, so I have my my points in that. Foster Gamble is up next in the conversation. You do not want to miss this. Share this out with your friends right here on Toward Anarchy.
You are tuned in to the Republic Broadcasting Network. Visit our website by going to republicbroadcasting.org.
No, we didn't discuss it. When she first reached out to me, she just asked if I would be interested in having either or, and I said both, either or. I don't care. Just let's do it. So
yeah, well, she's out, but I'm happy to be with you.
No, that's great. Thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate it. I'm a huge fan of the original movie, of course. I think a lot of people are. It was a huge worldwide hit, I think, and I know I'm one of the people that's guilty of giving out many copies of it to other people. It's really great to see it come back after all this time and reinvest in it again and come back and to look for the solutions to really find what it takes, like the movie says.
Yeah, no, we ended up giving the first movie away for free anyway, so yeah. You don't have to feel bad about that one. And have you seen Thrive 2?
I have not watched it yet. I was going to sit down and watch it today, but my family was not able to watch it with me. I want to sit down and watch it with the whole family. So we're doing that tomorrow night for a movie night. So I wasn't worried about like spoilers or anything talking to you, because it's not like a not like a Hollywood mystery or something like that. I mean, I know there are surprises. I know there are things that I'm looking forward to seeing that I haven't already heard before, but it's not like the surprise ending that I was worried about ruining if I talk to you first.
Well, there will be some surprises, but it won't ruin it for you.
Good. That's great. So it's been almost 10 years since the first one came out, and obviously it was really, 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 really well received. And so then was there always an intention to come back and look and try, because you guys have taken some time, obviously, to go all around the world and find these amazing people, physicists, doctors, normal, just business people, nobody with the title necessarily, who are doing these amazing things to solve some of the problems and some of the things that were exposed in the first movie.
Yeah, we never thought we would make another feature film. It's just way too much work. It's like giving birth. I gather that you got to take a break before you'd even consider it again. But what happened was we got contacted by over 1,000 inventors and innovators after the first movie came out. And so for a long time, I had a team of people, and we would just sort through these things, and we'd contact the ones that sounded real and have them send us business plans and stuff, and we'd check them out. And we narrowed it down to about 70 projects that looked like actual game changers. And then we spent, off and on for about 5 years, traveling around the world, visiting with the best ones that we could find. And as we expected, probably close to 80 to 90% of them weren't what they hoped they were or claimed they were, but that still left a lot. And what we saw was so exciting that Kimberly and I we were leading a workshop down in Costa Rica and sharing with people what we were seeing in terms of free energy, cancer cures, consciousness expanding techniques, freedom philosophy, and so forth. And people were getting so excited, they would come up to us after the workshop and say things like, I finally feel proud to be human again, or maybe there is hope, in this situation. And so we sat down over dinner and we looked at each other and go, we're so encouraged, and those people are feeling so helpless. We can't just keep this information to ourselves. We got to make another movie. So we bit the bullet, and that was almost exactly 1,000 days ago. And so we made the film. We launched it on September 26th. It's going big again. The last one became one of the most widely seen, if not the most widely seen documentary in history, with over 90 million views. There's still over 1 million people watching it a month. And it really showed us that people do want to know the truth about what's going on, most of them, even if it's difficult to hear, and especially if it's couched in a context of real and viable solutions. So that's what Thrive 2 is about.
Well, that's right. That's the point then, isn't it? Because I think, well, if we look back at the time that the first one came out, that Thrive came out the first time, we're talking about Occupy was still going on in some places. Some places it was already over, but Occupy was still going on, and there was a big push right at that period. It's something of a minor renaissance, I guess, of people sort of waking up to the Federal Reserve and maybe some of the things, false flags and stuff like that. So they're all really big, and then you guys come along and you don't just talk about the scary, government taking control and the police state and all these other things. You actually are looking at the idea that there's real people out here looking for solutions and trying to find these things, and that there are ideas that stretch back through time that maybe we need to take a look at, or any of these ideas that really talk about a solution, because that's something that's been missing for so long. I think everybody believes that government is out there to do some good. And I think that they put too much energy into it and waste too much time, too much money trying to get it to do things for them, set things straight, instead of just going out there and finding these things on their own, doing something good for their community. A perfect example of this is a local pastor here that runs a secondhand store, and they bring in all of these amazing goods and things that you couldn't get from other places without spending all this money, and they provide them to the community at these low prices, and he keeps running for office, and he keeps taking all this time away from the business. And I keep seeing him in there, and I say, stop it. You are doing what you need to do for the people of this community right here. Stop wasting your time with government.
Yeah, well, that's one of the things, Mike, that I love about what you're doing. You're one of, unfortunately, still a relatively small number of people, but rapidly growing, who actually understand what anarchy means. That it's not chaos, it's not blood in the streets, it's not violence, it's actually voluntarism. It's releasing people to be creative, do their own thing, as long as they don't violate other people. And that, to me, is the secret to all of the solutions.
Well, I love some of the words. If you go to thriveon.com, that's the exclusive place to see the movie. But when you look through the information, you get to all the information about what you guys were going through and doing this, and just these little write-ups and things like this. And I love these words: TransPolitical, decentralized, real people and inventions. I mean, just looking at what's really being done out there in places other than. It's not necessarily about this drive to make money, I think, and there's this confusion, this weird crossover between what people think is going on and what is really going on when it comes to their money being taken by this entity called government and supposedly being used for good, except that there's this flaw right at the beginning of it, where you're taking from somebody else to give to somebody else. It's not them giving of themselves.
Exactly. And that is the root of all evil, if you will. That when we buy in to the myth that somebody should rule over us, even if they sound well-intended and make all sorts of good promises, you have immediately injected cancer into the social system. And no matter what you do on top of that, the cancer's still there. And by definition, anybody who's given the right to take your money and do essentially whatever they want with it. The next thing they're going to do with that authority is create the laws to keep them in power. And the next thing they're going to do is create the laws to be able to control and print money. And then it's just off to the races from there. And, even if it takes 200 years, as in the case of the United States, it's going to go really, really bad. And now we're in a situation where humanity has the nuclear weapons, the biological weapons, the chemical weapons to destroy life on Earth. So we actually, for the first time in human history, we have to figure this one out now if we're going to transcend this and to be able to thrive. And I believe that what's missing is a universal morality. Rather than getting morality from who's got the biggest club to then whose God has the most power to whose state has the biggest army, to know we need a universal morality so that we have ethics that apply everywhere in all times, actually throughout the cosmos, not just on this planet. And I believe that the one and only candidate that I found after a lifetime of searching for that universal morality is the non-aggression principle, where no one is allowed to initiate force or fraud against anyone else except in true self-defense. And if you take that to its logical conclusion, then of course taxation is theft. So therefore you're not going to have government because they're dependent on that. So we have to figure out how to create and sustain a stateless society. And to the degree to which we are allowed to do that, we will be happier, we'll be more secure, and we'll be more prosperous.
What do you think is the number one barrier to that, when it seems like such a simple thing to say to somebody? You do it's a pop culture thing right now. You do you, I'll do me, and we can get along just fine. It seems like they understand that, but they won't take it to the next level. My argument is that we live in anarchy, that anarchy is the state of reality, and that it's all these other manipulations that are altering it and causing chaos. Because what we do is we live, we love, we laugh, we do all of these things together, voluntarily, every second of every day, create around us all the world that we want, and we do it without the consideration for any authority whatsoever. We don't even think about what the government wants to do with us, and with this myriad of actions that we create that we do at any given time.
Yeah, I ask people, how much do you want the government in your bank account? And they say, well, actually not really. Well, how much do you want them in your home? No, I don't need them there. Well, how much do you want them in your business? No, not there either. Well, how about your community? Well, there has to be law enforcement. Yeah, you can have independent law enforcement, but I find anyone who's willing to go through that process of questioning long enough comes to the realization that as long as we can get the services that we need somehow, that actually government isn't necessary, and it's actually the root of virtually all of the problems. I ask people, okay, so who do you think should rule? Should it be one person? Should it be a small group of people? Should it be the majority? Or should it be each of us rules ourselves as long as we don't violate anyone else? And almost everyone, I would say 98% of the people will answer, and I've done this with very large crowds, they say, no, I just want to rule myself. Well, then why do we turn around and vote and give our money away and send our kids off to war and so forth? Yeah, we're in a very challenging point in human history, but thank God for the internet and truth media like yours and what we're doing, because it is waking people up by the hundreds of millions very fast.
Yeah, and I think maybe now we're at a point where it's happening as fast as it ever will, this sort of awakening, because I see, I mean, there are other people that don't agree with this, but I see what's going on now, the masks and the coronavirus, and I see this, to me, as a push by government to make really a final make its final grasp on control, and really just taking control of everything across the board. We've had these little sacred areas where you can't get involved. Government can't get involved. Healthcare used to be one of those things. It's not anymore. Guns used to be one of those things. It's not anymore. Free speech used to be one of those things. Definitely not anymore. And so I think right now is the time for this, because back when Thrive, the first one, came out, that was the word that was in my mind. Solutions, solutions, solutions. Everything I was looking for. I try to talk to people who say, oh, well, we have to expose the New World Order. We have to expose the corrupt criminal government. I think it's already exposed. Can we? Let's just go on. Let's find some solutions. Let's stop concentrating on these meta events, these things that have happened. Let's concentrate on what we do since they've happened. And wow, one day at a time, one more person at a time, they get that idea. I think you brought it up. I think the one of the biggest places that we have a real problem with talking to people is security, police. Providing services that people don't otherwise provide for themselves, and they've been told that they don't have the right to defend themselves, that they don't have the ability to defend themselves, and it's not true. You're there. You're the person who's best to defend yourself at any one given moment, especially in a time of crisis. You want to pick up a phone and call and have somebody show up sort of 9 to 13 minutes later. That doesn't seem reasonable to me, but it seems apparently reasonable to other people.
Yeah. I also see this whole COVID thing as like a desperate trying to lunge across their projected goal line by the perpetrators of what we call the global domination agenda, because they have made tremendous progress in terms of their banking and governments and wars and all that kind of stuff toward their new world order. But there's some areas in which they haven't succeeded. They've been frustrated in taking Americans' guns. They haven't been able to create the cashless society where they can completely monitor and control all of your finances. They haven't been able to do martial law. They haven't been able to collapse the economy of the US and Europe as hard as they've tried. They haven't been able to now raise interest rates and raise taxes and so forth. And they're even the big banks are getting exposed as hundreds of trillions of dollars in debt. So they are truly desperate because people are catching on and they don't have any of the traditional ways out of their corrupt predicament. So I see that, well, I think they've been planning this for at least 10 years. In 2010, Bill Gates announced the decade of the vaccine. And then there was Agenda 21 happening right now. And then there's the Event 201 that happened just the end of last year that playing out this whole scenario. So they have been planning, I think, a very brilliant and very nefarious takeover, because their goal in my research is to get to that status of the one world government where they've got the law, they've got the money, and they've got the force. So then there's nowhere to run, nowhere to hide for human beings. And they've tried all different sorts of things. They've tried the Trans-Pacific Partnership. They tried the climate change fraud. And these things haven't worked. So now they're going for the ultimate, which is get people so afraid all over the world that they'll welcome in totalitarian control. And the best way to get them afraid is scare them for their health, literally scare them to death. And so I think that's what they're doing. I think that though there are real effects to this toxic phenomenon, which is the corona effect, I believe that the actual COVID thing, the pandemic, is a fraud, just like 9/11. Real people died very tragically, but it was a fraud to invade the Middle East, to get the Patriot Act through and all that stuff. And it worked. And I'm afraid that if we don't stand up and stop them, there's so many people running around scared, wearing masks alone in their car, in their home, running in the woods. And it's like, oh my God, come on, folks. If we don't wake up to what's going on now, this is giving them very quickly the cashless society, the global lockdown, the mandatory vaccines, the chips, the economic collapse. And, I could go on and on. It's all they've been dreaming of. All of a sudden, people are starting to be in favor of.
And it's all in one neat little package. They got it all with I don't know about manipulated disease or anything like that, made in a laboratory or something like that. There seems to be people who have looked at that and they say that there are the markers that suggest that this thing has been manipulated in a lab and then released to people. All that aside, it's real. There are people who are sick. There are people who need help, and it's being taken advantage of so quickly and so thoroughly. I'm one of the guys that's walking around without a mask.
Yeah.
So I see it all around me. Everybody has one on, and there's not really any reason for it. And because when it first started, it was a sign on the door at Walmart that said, "Put a mask on." Now there's not even a sign. There's no sign at Walmart anymore that tells them that they have to wear a mask, and they're still wearing the mask. And now we're almost full circle. It's almost a year, depending on who you ask. Many of us believe that the virus was here at this time of year last year. I know I had it in February. Long ago, my family and I caught it before they even started talking about it, really. And so we're a year later, and they told us right away that about this time of year that it was going to happen again, and that they were going to shut us down again. And what do we got? Starting on Monday, recommended lockdowns, stay at home advisories, things like that it all started with. And that's how it started last time. It was all an advisory. And then they just told us, we couldn't go out on the street anymore.
Yeah. Well, the antidote to this, to come back to our central topic,
yes.
The antidote to this is freedom. And I'll tell you why. And we lay this out for people in your audience who haven't seen Thrive 2 yet. I can't recommend strongly enough that you go to thriveon.com and rent or purchase this movie. And it's a gorgeous movie. It's very coherent. It's a result of, in the next decade of research. And it lays out, we take you on a journey around the world where, first of all, you get exposed to the revelation in right now of the unified field theory that Einstein sought all his life and never found. You have to understand geometry in order to get it. And some of my colleagues, and in particular Nassim Haramein, have now worked out the physics, the geometry, the math, and the music of the unified field. So we present that, and that's going to change everything. Then in traveling around the world, Kimberly and I found healers and inventors who understood enough of the geometric nature, the resonant nature of the unified field, that they actually crossed the threshold. And there were doctors, we have 3 different doctors who've been consistently like 80 to 90% curing cancer, even stage 4. And in very all natural ways. This is not some magic pharmaceutical pill. These are people who actually understand what cancer is and can get you the diet, the supplements, the lifestyle that will get rid of it if it's not too late and you haven't poisoned yourself too much with the chemo and radiation. So we bring that forward in the film. Then we noticed Kimberly was doing most of the health investigations. I was doing most of the energy. But when we would compare notes, we began realizing that whoever we were talking through, who was being successful in these breakthroughs, they were fundamentally talking about vibration, frequency, and resonance, whether it was a healer, an inventor, or a shaman. And so this is what the next phase of the film is about, where we go to visit some of the shamans in different places who are guiding people, sometimes with meditation, sometimes with breath work, sometimes with plant medicine, but they're basically teaching them to put their own brain, their own antenna in resonance with the harmony of the unified field. And when you do that, your consciousness expands, your emotions clear, your body begins to heal. It's astounding. And the mystics have known this for thousands of years. But then we take it a step further, because for 20 years, I've been seeking successful free energy inventors. Because historically, I believe they've existed, but they've been taken out of commission one way or another. But in the process of my travels, I found 3 of them. And we got permission to film them, and we bring 2 of the 3 forward in the film. The third one is not, security-wise, is not ready for prime time yet. But 3 different approaches, all of which access the energy of the unified field, because this field that we all live within is not empty. It's not a vacuum, it's a plenum full of virtually infinite energy. And you can see that in an atomic bomb. A hydrogen bomb splits one little hydrogen atom, and guess what? With the amount of energy that's released. Well, imagine if you access that same energy, but you did it through resonance, through dancing with the universe instead of exploding shit. It's dangerous the latter way. So we found 3 different inventors who had different techniques, who are putting out hundreds of kilowatts of energy from devices running for weeks or months that are not plugged into anything. They've got no moving parts, and they make no noise and no pollution.
Oh, wow. So I was going to ask you straight out, what was the most exciting thing that you come across when creating this one? And boy, that's pretty exciting. I don't know if that was the most exciting, but well,
technologically, it's certainly the most exciting. Probably the most profound and poignant for me was watching these doctors heal a whole bunch of my friends from cancer.
Oh, wow.
But then and so we when you go to see the film, you'll actually see these inventors, and we go behind the scenes and talk with them, and we go through the frustrations and the security issues and the funding and so forth. And then we pose the question, well, okay, if we've got cancer cures, we've got consciousness expansion access, if we've got free energy devices, so how come we're not buying those down at Walmart? And the answer is because the powers that want to be have outlawed them. They have told us, no, you don't get access to that. So that opens up the final chapter of the film, which is, okay, how did they get that power? And this brings up the whole liberty conversation, because it's not all that complicated. They've always taken that power. Mao said political power comes from the barrel of a gun. And it's always been that way. There's no divine right to rule. Some thug took over a community, put a tin hat on their head and said, oh, I'm your king, so now you got to pay me some protection money. And it's the same thing. It's gotten a little better, all the way up to democracy, but democracy is still mob rule. And if we can get to voluntarism, if we can get to the non-aggression principle as the basis for a thriving culture, guess what? We've got access to cancer cures and early detection and healthy lifestyles and food. We've got access to free energy, and we've got access to honest media. All of these things and more will be there like that if they're allowed to be. And that's why you're doing the work you're doing, and that's why we're doing what we're doing.
Hey, well, I think there are people like us who we've spent some time looking into these things, and I like to think that I just get it. I don't like to think that I have to really try to understand letting other people be who they are, letting other people be free. I say this all the time, this anarchism, this voluntarism, this libertarianism, whatever you want to call it, it doesn't take study. It takes practice. The things that we need to study are these things that you're talking about, these other ideas of once we're already letting everybody be who they are, what kind of amazing things can we generate from everybody just wanting to contribute to life? Not just, most of us are just walking through this thing, going from day to day, going to a job, making some money to buy some things to keep us entertained so that we can fall asleep at night, so we can get up in the morning, eat breakfast, and go to work and do it all over again. And it's this uninterrupted cycle of just producing instead of, and it's without any real wealth or any real value. It's just this idea, okay, I got to get up and go do my job, and well, hopefully, that helps the economy. I'll go out and spend my money, and that'll be better. And I think everybody feels it internally that there's something more. There's something more to the human existence than just going to work every day to feed your family.
Yeah, and that's just what the controllers want. They want drones who are resigned to their role of serving them. And what we've found with resonating with the field in terms of health cures and access to free energy and expansion of consciousness, when we took those same principles, because the innovators all talked about finding the still point and then going into resonance, which creates what the inventors call the straw, which taps the energy, whether it's healing energy or electric energy of the field, and brings it in to how you can use it. Well, those principles of going into resonance with the field are visible at the biological level. In your bloodstream, you've got trillions of these little toroidal, these little donut-shaped blood cells that are, if you're healthy, they're flowing around freely, just doing their thing, healing, nurturing, all that stuff. But if you're not healthy, if you're overstressed, if you're eating too much acidic food and so forth, if you're exposed to too many toxins, what happens is they all start to bunch together and they clog up your arteries, but they also start sucking energy from your organs, and then it turns into a tumor and cancer, all that kind of stuff. The key is nurture those individual cells so they can flow independently throughout the body, and you'll have the health to then do whatever you want. Well, the correlate to that, biologically, technologically, consciousness, the correlate to that at the human self-organization level is anarchy, is voluntarism, is the honoring of each individual as the sovereign entity that needs to be protected, because then sovereign beings can come together as voluntary community rather than being squashed together as communism. And so if we take the same principles and apply it at the human level, then we've found that integrity is, at the human level, it shows up as resonance with the field. And the way you resonate with the field as human beings is you live and let live, just like you were describing. And when we do that, everything else is possible.
It just sounds like harmony. It really does. I mean, it sounds weird to other people, but I guess it's definitions of words. It's too many years, many years wrapped up inside the political system and the political class, and the idea that there must be some way of distributing things, whether it's resources or whether it's money or whatever it is, that somehow that these self-anointed and self-appointed people can somehow equitably distribute things that are rare and hard to find to everybody, so everybody has a little bit of use. But then you take that and you analyze it and you realize, well, that guy can't use that. He doesn't know what to do with it, so he doesn't need to have any. And then you start talking about, well, maybe he needs to have more than this guy, and this guy needs to have more than that guy, and it's just this huge cluster that just builds on top of it. And for someone like me, I like bare bones. I like the simplest expression of something that you can find.
Yeah.
Because then it means that you can build the rest around it. You get the sort of finished product, and you have to take it apart to get to the things you want to. Whereas if you start out with just the raw materials, you build it into what you want. And I guess that's the trick, isn't it? They won't let us have the raw materials. They won't even let us have our own minds. They program us in their schools and tell us that we have to do things a certain way or it's not going to work, and we won't be able to participate.
It's like you're saying that they program us in schools. That's the trick. In the schools and in certain churches, they will program you for the first 12, 18, 22 years of your life into the notion that somebody should rule. And so people go around afraid that if somebody's not ruling, we're not going to be safe. And they have known that all along. If they can convince people that they need to be ruled, then they can be the ruler, and the rest, it is history. But the key to that, in my experience, is that people are afraid that there are sick, dangerous people out there. And guess what? They're right. There are about 3%, about 3% sociopaths and psychopaths in the human culture in virtually every country. So, but the misunderstanding is that we protect ourselves better by creating authoritarian hierarchical structures that are based on corruption to protect us. Because what actually happens is the psychopaths are drawn to that like a paperclip to a magnet, and then they naturally rise up in the military and in the agencies, intelligence agencies, and in the governments, because they don't have the scruples. They're willing to trample over people on the way up, lie, cheat, steal, kill, whatever it takes. So guess what? If you have that kind of structure and that kind of belief, you'll end up in a society that is basically being run by authoritarian psychopaths whose sole goal will be to protect themselves by dominating the entire world. And guess what? 2020.
They've really made it. Well, I mean, I'm just asking for a friend, but should I be concerned that the people who say they will protect me and my property are actually the people who are most likely to steal from me and kill me? Is that a problem? I should.
Well, if you look to history, I think you got some confirmation that, socialism is getting really popular again. Oh my God.
Scary.
And I've talked with hundreds of particularly young so-called self-proclaimed socialists. And I always ask them first, I said, so what's your working definition of socialism? And not a single one so far has known the real definition of socialism. And that's how the schools have duped people. Virtually all of them say, oh, well, socialism is when the government finally starts taking care of people. And I'll say, well, actually, the definition is that you give over control of the means of production to the state. And it's actually just the introductory phase of ultimately giving all your property and yourself over to the state, because socialism is the preparation for communism. And I say, are they in these universities where you're getting trained in Marxism like this? Do you study any of the tragic outcomes of these socialist states? Never. Hundreds of millions of people slaughtered by their own governments, tens of times. Without exception, this is what happens with this belief. And of course, young people are drawn by the myth that they're going to take care of people and just free stuff. Hey, I get free college. I get free insurance. I get free homes. Why wouldn't I go along with that? Well, pick up your history book and realize that that's what Mao and Pol Pot and Stalin and they all promised their people that. And then it turned into mass incarceration, torture, and slaughter, as well as ecological and economic destruction every single time. If there are countries that aren't there yet, they're on their way.
Yeah, and that's the thing. That's what they say, isn't it? Oh, that wasn't real socialism. That wasn't real communism.
Yeah. They say, they hold up as an example, Sweden and Norway and so forth.
Sure.
Well, those countries were in the top 10 in GDP early in the 20th century. And then it was on the back of the wealth that entrepreneurs created that the socialists came in and literally took that wealth, destroyed the creators and the creativity, and started building their so-called utopia. Started going bad really fast. And it's only because they pulled back to much more free market policies now that those countries are recovering. And the same, if they'd let it go, it would have been like China. China was an absolute destructive Holocaust under Mao, and it was only because they let the free market back in to a sufficient extent that they're now on the verge of becoming the leading economy in the world. They're still not there morally and ethically, and they're really caught in this dilemma of trying to wrap the free market in a communist bubble. So that's not going to last. But it was the free market that rescued them.
It was the free market that rescued them, and this is what I try to tell socialists. I try to tell communists. What I explain to them. Okay, look, what's happening is that the people that took your money and took your resources and pooled it all and put it on, they're practicing capitalism with your money.
That's right.
You don't get to. They get to.
Yeah.
They get to take it and spend it on whatever they want and however they want. You don't. So that's the difference between capitalism. I try to be honest with people about this. I try to get people to look at this, the root word of something when they start to talk about something that they want to ask about anarchy. What does anarchy mean? Well, it means no rulers, literally. That's what the word means. It doesn't mean anything else but that. You can superimpose all these other ideas over the top of it if you want, but when it comes down to it, what the word means is no rulers. That's just that simple. Well, capitalism is the same way. Its root word is kaput. It's head. It's literally being the head decision maker of your own economy. What's wrong with that?
Right. As long as your own economy is yourself and those people who choose to work with you.
Yeah. As long as it's conducted voluntarily, and then what happens? Here's one of these things that I get that's weird. It again comes into the play on the words and the way people understand things and they hear things. You go through and you talk about anarchy, you say no rulers, and they say, that's not good. That's chaos. That's a bad thing. When you say voluntarism to them, you say voluntaryism. You say, use the word volunteer in there. And all of a sudden it changes it as if I meant anything differently. All I'm saying is that you don't get to rule over me. And guess what? By virtue of that same fact, I'm going to offer you the same comfort throughout life. I'm not going to try to rule over you. Let's do this thing together, like we do every single day out here on the street.
Yeah, I rarely use the word anarchy, except with people like you, because you understand it, because particularly anarcho-capitalism, because if I use that term, I've lost almost everybody by the end of the sentence. But if you say voluntary exchange and voluntarism, then they're like, oh, well, what does that mean? Oh yeah, I like that. I believe in that. So it's very tricky to be able to name this stuff accurately and make sure you're talking about the same thing.
Yeah. Well, free markets, that's a good one. Free markets can't exist without capitalism, because capitalism is literally you making your own personal economic decisions before anybody else does. So if you're not making those decisions yourself, principally, then of course there is no free market, because you didn't get to decide how much money you had in the first place, how much was taken away from you, what products were available in the market, how much you could spend on them, and so forth and so on.
Yeah, well, it was one of my heroes, Ludwig von Mises, who was one of the first of the real libertarians. And he was the one who, in my experience, really solved the price problem for the first time. Because the big question that the socialists and the fascists and the communists say they're trying to solve is the equitable distribution, the optimal distribution of resources and of wealth. But what they're really doing is just conning everybody to giving up their wealth to a small band of oligarchs who then have to protect themselves by destroying everybody else. But what most people have no clue of, and they're certainly not teaching it in most universities, is that the reason the free market is so brilliant is because it follows natural law. The most optimal distribution of resources comes through allowing things to be priced naturally. So the more there is of something, the lower the price is going to be. The less there is, the higher the price is going to be. That's going to incent people to go out and make it. That's going to lower the price. So it's like water. That's going to keep balancing through a real and honest price mechanism. But if you don't allow that, if you start in with universal basic income and minimum wage and these progressive taxes and so forth, then what you've done is screwed with nature. And it's not going to work any more than trying to regulate the weather, like they're trying to do with HARP and all these chemtrails and these high voltages and so forth. Now it's just a complete disaster, because you take a system which has worked for a billion years and it's complex beyond our wildest dreams, and it is in fact what nurtures our very aliveness. And then you think, well, I can control that, and it just turns to crap every single time. But now, as I mentioned before, we have the ability to destroy ourselves with this kind of misunderstanding. So I like to say, if we can win the info war, if enough people can wake up to these natural principles now, then we won't have to fight the physical war.
Well, in the best place, I think, I will go. My family and I are going to watch a movie tomorrow night, which is great because this doesn't actually air until Sunday. So I will have actually watched it before I go on the show, and I'll be able to talk about it a little bit more and clear it up. But I think that you have to be looking for good information. You have to be good looking. You have to go out and seek them. You cannot. We have this huge problem right now with social media, not just the inability to communicate with each other, reflecting itself in the social media, but the fact that now people think it's easier to get their information. They think that they can sit back and let it come to them, that they don't have to go out and look through it and sift through it.
Yeah, one of the things that we did in Thrive 2 was we talk about the critical importance of truth media. And by truth media, I'm not saying that anyone has 100% truth and so forth. The distinction I'm making with truth media is that it's people who are genuinely committed to finding and communicating the truth, rather than pandering and spinning for the pharmaceutical companies or for a nation state or for a political party or something like that. So one of the things we do is we put up a graphic of a dozen of the truth media sources that I most depend on, that I find most reliable, and that I most respect. And then we've got an article coming out on our in our newsletter in a couple of weeks, where it's called Beyond Right and Left, where we get our news. Because like you, I scan a lot of different sources every day. And I put the top 75 sources that I'm looking at virtually every day, because I don't believe anyone, but I have a lot of trust in people's intentions. So then I can take their information, see if it makes sense, cross references with other good sources, and then try, make a compelling case for what seems to be true.
Yeah, no, that's what I was saying earlier about just kind of getting it. I mean, I don't need necessarily, maybe many people do, maybe there are a lot of people that do, and maybe they want it, and it's good, that's fine. But I don't necessarily need to be told what's going on. Maybe informed that there's something happening, and then I can go and look for myself and just say, okay, that guy's got a little information, there's a little there to put it all together and come out with the best possible picture of what it is. So yeah, I get that. That's amazing that you do that. That's great that you would share your resources with us. I think that's what this is all about, really, and someone like yourself who has the time and the drive to actually really want to see other people thrive, not just yourself, but to see the whole planet and every individual do well for themselves.
Well, we're finding each other all over the planet. I'm sure you're experiencing that all the time, especially because we've kept the internet reasonably open so far. And so what we've done after the launch of Thrive 2 is I opened what I call my freedom portal on the internet. It's a show somewhat like yours, where we really explore these issues of freedom. And the subtitle is "There is Light at the End of the Rabbit Hole." So I take people, we take a particular issue, U.S. elections or COVID or free energy or something like that, and I'll take people through the rabbit hole into, okay, there's something happening in the world. The next level is that somebody's spinning it to get you to believe what they want you to believe. if you follow the money and you follow the facts, it's ultimately going to lead you to, well, okay, what's really wrong? Who has destroyed the wholeness of a natural system, and how are they benefiting? And once you get that, then you've got enough information to create commensurate solutions. And then we come out of the rabbit hole with, okay, who am I as an individual activist? What's my purpose? What's my sector of endeavor? What's my favorite issue to work on? What's the level of engagement that feels most comfortable to me? And then how can we collaborate with other people? And we will be launching, after the first of the year, we'll be launching a solutions hub, which allows people to collaborate virtually or locally around these solutions and around the freedom principles all over the planet. Because over the last decade, we've really found very successful collaboration strategies so that people don't have to do it all themselves. If you've got like-minded people with similar goals, but you've all got different skills. So you bring the lawyers and the scientists and the media people and the doctors and the relationship specialists and so forth. You bring them all together in a whole system approach to a problem. And we've just had huge success getting GMOs banned in Colorado and glyphosate thrown out in Maui. And we stopped a toxic aerial spraying in Northern California. But this is the path through the rabbit hole to solutions that we cover in the what we call our subscription freedom portal at thriveon.com.
That's fantastic. I suppose I better let you get out of here. I'm sure you've got other places to go and people to talk to tonight. I'm sure I'm not the only one. Thank you so much for taking the time, and thank you so much for the work that you're doing. You and Kimberly are truly light workers, and we love you and we appreciate you and wish you the best of luck in everything that you do. And please keep the stuff coming. keep making more movies and keep finding more solutions for us, please.
Well, I'll be in this conversation until my last breath, and I appreciate your having me on, and thanks for the work that you do.
Anytime. Thank you so much, Foster. Take care.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye. Thank you. Awesome. Thank you so much for that. I really do appreciate it. And anytime I'll follow up with Heather and leave with her a link where all this is at. If you guys would throw it out on the social media or whatever for people to listen to it come Sunday. And just thank you so much. It was really great getting to talk to you.
You're welcome. It was a pleasure talking with you, Mike.
Awesome. Take care. We'll see you. Bye-bye. And that's it. That is the conversation. That is fantastic. I don't know about you, but I feel it. You know, he has all of the understanding covered in my view of things. He's looking at the same things that I'm talking about all the time. He's looking to make those same connections, the better communication, the voluntary interaction, the looking at the manipulation of the currency, the looking at the manipulation of words and education. It's amazing, right? It can be at times like this. This could be, maybe the most important show that I've done so far at this point. Just being able to lend what little voice I have to such a big movement and such a grander idea. Somebody and people that have taken the concepts that this show is built on, that this network is built on, these ideas of the individual and freedom and liberty, all of these concepts, and really taking them worldwide, and just look for people who aren't just saying them and waving a flag and saying they're doing something, that they're doing so. They're taking whatever skill, whatever knowledge, whatever tools they have to go forth out into an unknown world, an unfriendly world, and just say their piece and make their mark and do their thing. And they're not doing it with any consideration for the authority. That's some of the beautiful part of it. I just wish people would get that authority doesn't have anything to offer us. Picture yourself on a desert island. And all of the things that you get two things to bring with you. Is one of them going to be a politician or a tax collector? No. They are the most useless things on the planet. They truly are. They're parasitic. They're incapable of functioning. Ken and I were talking about this as we're listening to the show and the conversation. They're parasites. They aren't capable of functioning without you. So all you have to do is take your energy away from them and they die. That's it. That's all this is about. Then the rest of it is the fine details, the conversation stuff, the words, the subjective, objective, and intrinsic valuation of things. Which brings me to a point, because I was telling Ken, we were like, what are we going to do? We're going to jump into a commercial, because this is a odd timed bit right there. It was only like 13 minutes, and none of our segments are 13 minutes. He said, we'll just move some things around. We'll just do this. And I said, all right, well, I have a rant that I can go on, and it's about the subjective and objective and intrinsic notions and people that are arguing about them. And I think I will have to do a paper. I've talked about this before, maybe try to explain these things a little bit in depth. But what I try to talk to somebody about what these things mean. Okay, first of all, if there's a word for something, then there's probably a reason for that word. That means that it didn't exist somewhere else. And even if it's a theoretical word, there must be some practice, some reality that suggests that a word is needed. Otherwise, words define things. You know what something is you know what a chair is by saying the word chair, right? You can describe it. It's a relatively flat thing with a few legs that's going to hold you up and you can sit on it. It's a chair. You know what it is by the words. So the words are important. And if they exist for a reason. And you can't dismiss them with your opinion about them or your feelings about them, especially when presented with the definition of them. You don't get to do that. In your own reality you do, but not when you're having an argumentation, not when you're having a conversation, a debate about the validity of ideas that you've expressed or that someone is attempting to refute or that you're attempting to refute. It is important. And so the valuation of something becomes subjective, objective, and it can have something about it that's intrinsic, a natural value to it. And I've tried many times in different ways to explain it to different people, and I found the easiest way is through musical instruments and music, because they have extreme value, but it's extremely subjective, but it's extremely objective because you can see that people pay for it. And this is what I mean. Comic books are another good example. Currency of comic books as opposed to money is another good example of the way to describe the difference between subjective and objective and intrinsic values. When I speak in terms of those things, intrinsic is a natural value that no matter what you use it for, somebody else can use it for something else. That's the point. That's why fiat currency no currency really fits the definition of money. That's the point of having a word for money and having a word for currency. They're two different things. They serve two different purposes. Money is a real thing that has a natural intrinsic value in the sense that you can take it and you can use it for exchange, if it's gold or silver or salt or comic books or whatever, in that function of a currency. But then to have that intrinsic value, it has to be usable as something other than a means of exchange, a medium of exchange, which is one of the properties of money. It has to have some other function, some real world function. You can make it into something else. Whether you can or not doesn't matter. And that's where objective comes in. Objective valuation of something comes in, is that your opinion of somebody else's valuation doesn't matter unless, of course, you're involved in the transaction. So that's how you derive objective valuation of something. Third-party valuation of the thing that you're considering. If you're going to do a deal with someone, you walk into a comic book store and you say, I have a comic book, and on eBay it says that this guy's trying to sell this comic for $100. That's your valuation of it based on whatever information. That's your valuation. That's your subjective valuation based on whatever subjective or objective data you accrued to place on it. So that's yours. You bring it to me, you tell me that, I look up an aggregator, one of dozens of aggregators of information of sales of comic books, and I say, well, this comic book actually only sells for about $10 shipped to somebody. So we have a very big difference in our understanding. I have a subjective valuation of it was only going to be just worth so much to me, period, whether I can take it around and resell it, whether it can make me money in this case. You're bringing me a comic book in my store that you want me to buy from you. And to get an objective valuation of it, neither of us can place that valuation. We have to get it somewhere else. That's the definition of objective. It's neither your opinion nor my opinion nor necessarily their opinion. It's really truly the most that you can find of a market derived valuation of something. And I apologize if this conversation loses some people. It's very economic. It's very specific in its language, but it's important because I'm talking about the language, and I'm always talking about the language. And I don't want to have any more conversations with people that aren't honest and that don't understand the language and can't actually argue. And I don't mean holler at each other. I mean debate. I mean talk to each other using skill sets like logic and rhetoric and language and all of the things that come with the trivium and all of these other theoretical ideas about how you converse with somebody in order to reach a conclusion, to reach an understanding, to come up with not even new. I mean, maybe it probably has to be new. It has to be new to somebody in the group if there's going to be an argument, a debate about it. One has to have some view or some piece of information that the other one does not have if they're able to convince them to change their mind. And what the hell is the point of having a conversation in a learning environment if it's not going to be ruled by simple ideas? Again, we're talking about being honest about the way you converse with other people if you want them to understand what it is, and particularly to believe you when you present something. You must be honest about where you're coming from. You must be accepting of your failures when you fail to communicate properly with someone. And you also have to realize where they failed to communicate with you and where it's okay to say that the conversation is over, that the argument is ended, that there is no end to this conversation. There is no learning. There is no growth to be had in the conversation. You need to be able to walk away, and it's okay to walk away, and it's okay to walk away for your own reasons, whatever they may be, if it's just your sanity, as long as you're being honest about the fact that it's just your sanity, or you're being honest about the fact that it's this person trying to make an argument or a counter-argument to my claim that is faulty. And not only is it faulty, but they're using improper language, and they're abusing words, and they're abusing terminology, and they're using every excuse they can to do anything but actually add to the conversation or refute the claim, as is usually the case. So someone makes a claim and someone attempts to refute it. That's argumentation. Or they try to enlighten it or bring more information out of them to clarify the argument. But either way, that's the point. It's the basic. And when it comes to the money thing, the subjective and objective and intrinsic valuation of something, if you in the marketplace do not know what the value of your item is when you go to buy it or you go to sell it, you are at a disadvantage. That's not my fault. It's not my fault that I'm in the business of practicing understanding the world around me, whether it be for economic reasons or for my own sanity. Again, that's not my fault that you haven't, or that you don't, or that you won't, or that you will make up any excuse that you can to play yourself off as a victim, or to play someone else off as a victim, as them not being heard. Well, if what they're saying is not important, doesn't fit the conversation, is illogical, is wrong, doesn't use the proper language, why shouldn't you dismiss it? So there's my rant. I told you I could have a rant. I said I had a rant, and I had a rant. And truly, really, even for those of you who don't necessarily catch that conversation, I know I'm throwing it out there fast, and I'm impassioned about it. Slow it down. Go back. Listen to the archive. Listen to it again. I'm not trying to offend anybody. I'm not trying to offend you unless you need to be offended, unless you need to realize that you are the part of the problem in the conversation that isn't happening. Every time the conversation breaks down and somebody walks away, analyze the conversation. Was it your fault? Was it theirs? Was there something that you could have done about it? I don't want to have any more dishonest conversations, and there are so many of them, especially if you participate in the social media. It's abusive to someone who wants to have an honest conversation, because it just, especially if you get a larger following, you have more people commenting and more people sharing, and they want to put their 2 cents in. It is offensive, and it comes at you from many, many different angles, but it all amounts to the same thing for the negative impact on the conversation, and it's people using fallacy, it's people abusing language, it's people trying to suggest that feelings need to be first considered in argumentation, in coming to a debate, and that's just not true. The language, the truth of the argument, all of these things are going to press much more importantly than the feelings of the person on the other side. Yeah, they're not dismissible, but you have to understand where they are. Yeah, who do I think I am? I wonder that sometimes. You know who I think I am? I think I'm just a guy with a voice, and it's your choice to listen or not, and it's your choice to realize whether or not you are a part of the communication problem. I'm going to tell you that if you have a problem communicating with people, you better look at you first before you start looking at what other people are doing. And as long as you're honest about making sure that you've looked at you first, then it's okay to go ahead and degrade, dismiss, refute, ignore, whatever you choose to do to any other dishonest argument. Absolutely. So I'll come back and I'll tell you what's coming up here over the next few weeks right here on Toward Anarchy. I actually think that that's fair. I believe that that's actually quite fair. It's frustrating. It's very hard right now. There's so many things compiled on top of each other, COVID and just the collapsing economy and just all of these things that are contributing to poor conversations, and everybody is stressed. There's a battle on the streets. Here was last night, Washington D.C., and I saw just a brief, votes rigged, and people just feeling completely displaced by their government. It's a fair assessment that conversations are combative, and that people I want to shy away from a word like argumentation because it has a negative connotation. But this is what I'm trying to get across as a point of what I'm trying to get across as something like that. Don't let the controllers manage your language and manage your understanding of what things are. Use words for what they really are, and use them clearly and speak them proudly if they represent who you are and what you do. If it's anarchy or whatever it is, let it speak for you. As long as again, it's about this honesty. You got to be honest with yourself before you're honest with anyone else. But lawyers, no, we're not talking about anything about lawyers. No, boy, that's a whole nother conversation about legalese and lawyers and the way they manipulate the words. But that's right. I mean, it's a good point. They are word twisters, but they're a part of that larger. They absolutely are. They're a part of that larger control mechanism. So naturally, it flows. And there's lawyers have their own dictionary. They have. You try to make an argument with somebody, and they're like, "Well, that's not what that word means. Our book over here that we studied says this word means something different." It's no wonder. I was like, you're going to take a word that's quite normally accepted to be one thing, and you're going to completely twist it around for your legal reasons to put it into your courts. And the terms. That's right. You have to understand the terms, and there's a reason that the word terms is used too, because you submit to terms. They're not optional. They're not yours. They're not your choice. It's theirs. So, Ken's great for bouncing this stuff off of. I said I'd come back and I'd tell you what's coming up over the next few weeks, and I lied because I haven't a clue. I know that I'm going to take off next week, not take it off. I'll be here, but I've had guest after guest after guest, and it's been awesome. And there's been thousands of hits on the website, and all of these lists, all of these files served up over the internet and across the archive, and I want to take a day and geek out and just do some stuff with myself. Maybe I'll invite just a friend, not somebody to even have any kind of serious conversation at all. Totally just fun, And then I'll get back to it. I have some people that I've been talking to. I'm always talking to people about who will come on the show, and I'm looking at some past shows, and I'm thinking, we got to have them back on. And Ken and I keep talking about getting Jamie back on the show and having some more music, and I got to do it all. I want to do everything. I want to have it all fit and it all be perfect, but it doesn't work that way. You just do it for 2 hours at a time every week and roll the dice. I'll be back next week. Thanks for tuning in. You take care of yourself and just spread something good. Do something good for somebody this week, and it'll make you feel good too. And we'll see you next week. Take care.
You're listening to Republic Broadcasting Network, because you can handle the truth.